So here now, House Judiciary member and 2020 presidential candidate, Congressman Eric Swalwell. Good to have you with us this evening. Thank you for being here. I guess first your reaction to the news this evening that you will not be hearing in your committee from William Barr tomorrow.
If the Attorney General had nothing to hide, he would come testify to Congress tomorrow. He played a home game today and his credibility was destroyed. Now it's time to come to the other legislative branch over on the House side.
Why don't you question him yourself? Yeah. Why would you want to put staffers in front of you? Why don't you just do it, do your own job?
Oh, I will question him myself if he comes, and I will be allowed to question him myself. But if you recall, during the Dr. Ford testimony for the Kavanaugh hearing, staffers were also used in addition to senators to just supplement the questioning so you could really get to the essence of things. If Dr. Ford is able to do it, why is the Attorney General,
as I remember, a judge who had done a lot of sexual assault cases,
who was brought in? She was a prosecutor.
Excuse me. Yeah. One person.
Dr. Ford, who's not a lawyer, subjected herself, and the Attorney General of the United States. Again, what does it say about our Attorney General if he can't take questions from another lawyer? That should bother you too.
All right. So when you watched all of that play out today, and just with regard to what Ted Cruz had to say, he said, look, in the end, it seems like we're arguing over whether or not Mueller and Barr had the same takeaway from this report. Why do you think it would be that Robert Mueller did not find for obstruction in the report? Given all of that and given the arguments that we heard today, why do you think that Robert Mueller did not find obstruction on the part of the president?
Well, I'll just go with what Robert Mueller said, which was, and I've read the full report, he said partially because the Department of Justice does not allow him to indict a sitting president. And Barr has mischaracterized that, which is why Mueller did something that was very uncharacteristic for Mueller. He sent a letter to Barr saying he believes that his opinion has been mischaracterized. And that's what's so troubling here is Mueller has the utmost respect and trust of the American people. He's the one that we should hear from. He's the one that should come next before anyone else.
In the end, I think this is what, everyone listens to all this back and forth. But in the end, Mueller and Barr agreed that they would not move forward on obstruction and that there had been no collusion. I mean, on those 2 points, which are the whole basis of the special counsel investigation, they agreed. And with regard to what you just said, I thought it was very interesting today. William Barr made it very clear that on several occasions, Robert Mueller had said that he had separated out the argument that you can't indict a president, and he had still not decided to move forward with obstruction. Let's play Bill Barr on that.
Special Counsel Mueller stated 3 times to us in that meeting in response to our questioning that he emphatically was not saying that but for the OLC opinion, he would have found obstruction.
So what do you think about that?
That's not what Mueller said in his report. But also what concerns me a lot, Martha, is that Barr testified today that he didn't even review the underlying evidence to make a decision. So, I mean, as a former prosecutor, that really bothers me because I would never make a charging decision without reading the entire evidence file. And for him to say he didn't review the evidence shows me that he was more interested in protecting Donald Trump and being his lawyer than upholding the rule of law and making sure that we're all protected.
Let's just assume for a moment that that's true. It doesn't
Well, he said
change,
it, so I should assume it's true.
It doesn't change the underlying finding. He wasn't the investigator. Robert Mueller had a huge team, 19 attorneys who are, some of the best people in the country at what they do. They were the people who looked at all the underlying evidence. The burden was on them to do that. Then they present their findings, and Mueller and Bill Barr had a choice. He could either make those public or he could just say no prosecution. That is their job. Prosecute or not prosecute. That's all he had to say. But instead, they made every single thing public. So I guess this whole, sort of jump on Bill Barr thing is a little bit hard for, I think, some people in the country watching all this to figure out.
Well, the reason that we're jumping on him is because the Mueller team identified 10 instances where the president obstructed justice. In part, they said they could not indict because he was a sitting president. And then Barr testified today he didn't even review the underlying evidence. I mean, that's maddening that the person making the final sign-off here makes a decision without reviewing the evidence. I'll just say one other thing. What concerns me the most, because I don't want to relitigate the past, there were 200 pages of links between the Trump campaign and the Russians. And it was clear that they never went into the financial records or the financial dealings between the Trumps and the Russians. That is something we're going to do on the Intelligence Committee, but that should also concern us as we go into 2020.
That's your prerogative, and you have, obviously, you guys can move forward with impeachment proceedings for the president. I mean, the ball is really in your court now, and you've said that you might, you want Barr to resign or he could be impeached. The president's impeachment is on the table. So are you planning to move forward with impeachment of the president or impeachment of Bill Barr?
So Barr was supposed to turn over to us the full Mueller report because we've only seen there's an eighth of it that's missing. He didn't turn over that today.
Well, you can see that if you go into the SCIF. You can read the whole thing.
No. So Martha, that's not true. Only Mr. Nadler and Mr. Schiff have been invited, and to their point, how fair is it that they would go in and read the full report but be told they can't take notes, can't tell the world anything? So if they see something concerning and they say, hey, we need to impeach the president because of what we saw, just trust me, who would go along with that? I mean, I love the two of them, but I would still want to see the evidence myself, and that's their point.
My guess is that if you request to see it, you'll probably be granted that. It sounds like there's such a minimal amount of redaction.
I'm requesting, Attorney General.
I don't blame you. I don't blame you. Eric Swalwell, thank you very much, sir. Good to see you tonight.
Compliance with congressional subpoenas is not optional, and if good faith negotiations don't result in a pledge of compliance in the next day or two, the next step is seeking a contempt citation against the Attorney General. He is trying to blackmail the committee into not following what we think is the most effective means of eliciting the information we need.
Chairman Jerry Nadler about the Attorney General not showing up to testify tomorrow in the House. The DOJ saying it was unnecessary and inappropriate the way they structured the hearing. Obviously, he did testify today, and one viewer, a prominent one, watched a little of it.
Well, I guess they want to treat him differently than they have anybody else. And for many, many years, they've never done it this way, where they're bringing in outside counsel or something. And that's not the way, you elect people, they're supposed to be able to do their own talking. But he did a fantastic job today, I'm told. I got to see some of it. He did a fantastic job. And it's all a big hoax, this whole thing with Russia. It turned out there is no collusion. There is no obstruction.
President Trump, that whole interview at 8 p.m. on FBN. Let's bring in our panel on a big day. Ben Domenech, publisher of The Federalist. Mara Liasson, national political correspondent of National Public Radio, and Washington Post columnist Mark Thiessen. Ben, overall, a lot happened, obviously, throughout this testimony. We were stuck on this very panel, watching all of it. Your sense of how the Attorney General fared?
Well, I think that depends entirely on who you talk to.
Your perspective, yeah.
I mean, this is a perspective where you're going to have very different reactions to what was going on. And while I know that there were some comparisons going on to the Kavanaugh subject, there similarly you saw a situation where the people watching it really perceived very different things. Personally, I think that Barr actually did a pretty good job of fending off the questions that he received from a lot of the different Democratic senators. I think it actually didn't serve them well to have some people on the panel who were more interested in sort of creating a 2020 moment for themselves as opposed to asking some tough questions. And I think that he comported himself well enough when it came to the president and what he said as well, that this is someone who he views as someone who can defend him in a very effective manner.
The big moment, Mara, of this, a lot of the questioning was after Bill Barr put up the 4 pages where he comes to the conclusions of the Mueller report before releasing the whole redacted report. He gets a letter from Bob Mueller saying that he had concerns. Yep. Then he picks up the phone and calls Bob Mueller. Yep. This is the exchange where he talks about that phone call.
He said that they were concerned about the way the media was playing this. And I asked him if he felt that my letter was misleading or inaccurate, and he said no. There were notes taken of the call.
May we have those notes?
No.
I'm going to write a letter to Mr. Mueller, and I'm going to ask him, is there anything you said about that conversation he disagrees with? And if there is, he can come and tell us.
And that's where we left it.
This is a common theme, which is Bill Barr tells us what Bob Mueller thinks or feels, and then later maybe we either read a report that Mueller wrote or we might have testimony from Mueller himself. So I think that right now, Barr's credibility with the Democrats on the committee is very low. They feel that after he got that letter from Mueller, he came up and testified that before them on April 9th. He was asked, are you aware of the Mueller team's concerns about your letter and how you characterize the report? He said no, but he'd already had this letter from Mueller and talked to him. So I think right now everybody's waiting to hear what Mueller has to say for himself.
Lindsey Graham says he's not going to call Mueller up. He says enough is enough. He's done. Obviously, the House wants to hear from him May 15th.
Yeah, well, he's right not to. I mean, if Mueller wants to come up and testify, by all means. But look, Barr offered Mueller a chance to review the memo beforehand, and Mueller declined. So now all of a sudden to come around and say, well, I don't like the way it's being covered. Well, it's kind of rich to come around and complain about the coverage when you had a chance to review the memo beforehand and give some suggestions. So this was a Shakespearean drama, and the title was Much Ado About Nothing. Bob Barr has been
Bill Barr.
Bill Barr. We keep doing the same thing.
Right.
He's been completely open about this. He overrode DOJ regulations to release this report with very few redactions. He's given Congress a virtually unredacted copy of the report that they can review. He put out a short summary because he didn't want to leave the country in suspense while they went through the redaction process. And this is a complete non-issue, except that the Democrats are trying to find anything because they didn't get their Russia collusion story, because it turns out the underlying crime didn't happen, and so they're having trouble letting go, and so they're trying to go after Bill Barr in this way.
The other part of the hearing deals with the Republicans, who have a lot of questions about the origin and the beginnings of this investigation. Here is Senator Cornyn and Graham.
Knowing what we know now, that basically the allegations made therein were secondhand, hearsay, or unverified. Can we state with confidence that the Steele dossier was not part of the Russian disinformation campaign?
No, I can't state that with confidence, and that is one of the areas that I'm reviewing. I'm concerned about it, and I don't think it's entirely speculative.
Do you share my concerns about the FISA warrant process?
Yes.
Do you share my concerns about the counterintelligence investigation, how it was opened and why it was opened?
Yes.
It seems, Ben, that he's set on moving forward with his own investigation and obviously tracking the Inspector General's investigation as well.
This is going to be a very serious and important review. I think that all these Republicans who have questions about the way that this was spun up, are certainly operating in defense of the current president. But it's important for the country that we have confidence in our law enforcement situation, where investigations like this under any president cannot be spun up without meeting various thresholds. You cannot weaponize the criminal justice system in the country in that way without degrading our faith in all of these institutions.
Mar, we won't speculate what that's going to look like or what the results are going to be, but it seems that Bob Mueller wanted to get that letter out, or his team did.
It is.
You don't
really
write it down unless you're going to do it.
Yeah. As people have said, it's very unusual for somebody like him to go to paper. In other words, to want to memorialize his concerns about Barr's letter. It's really, really unusual that he would do that, and I am sure he's going to be asked about it a lot if and when he finally comes before Congress.
But the bottom line is the first thing that he was charged with, he does not find conspiracy, collusion, cooperating with the Russians.
Conspiracy, collusion is not a legal term, but
right,
certainly
conspiracy,
he didn't find
cooperation with the Russians.
He didn't do it. The President of the United States did not conspire with Russia to steal the election. And the fact is, if you're Donald Trump, imagine if any of you were out there, if you were accused of a crime you knew you didn't commit, and somebody appointed a special counsel who spent 2 years and $25 million investigating you, you'd be pretty ticked off. And you'd want to know how this started, how it happened, and why did we waste the American people's time and tax dollars to
Mueller was also going to, it was tasked with explaining what the Russians did, which he did in great detail, and he did a great service to the country.
And the only person who focused on that today was Ben Sasse. And that's what, if Democrats were serious, they would say, the president didn't do this, we should now get to the bottom of what Russia did and try and figure out a way to stop it from happening again.
Just appreciate that at the end of the line for everyone in their career, at some point they become a media critic. This was his his pages of media criticism, essentially, from Bob Mueller. I do think, though, that the overall idea that somehow we need larger context for this very detailed legal argument that we're having over the nature of obstruction was not something that was going to somehow change the narrative dramatically or replay it in a way that Bob Mueller would have preferred. That was never going to be the focus on this report that led to the conclusions that it had.